whoever is running the show behind the scenes, for the world, or at least the Western world, you want to call them, the Bilderberg or the Illuminati, or some people even speculate extraterrestrials. I'm personally a little impartial to all those, but there was an interview done by an astrophysicist lady. I don't know her last name, but her first name was Stella something, and she was an astrophysicist for NASA. And today she's around 65, 70 years old. And she had actually mentioned that when she was in her internship, when she actually worked as an apprentice under Wernher Von Braun. For those who don't know, Wernher Von Braun was the main scientist for the Nazi regime. He actually did the Bell experiment. He was really number one to Hitler. He was really the number one scientist for the Nazi regime that later came to America and worked, and really was, in a lot of respects, the reason that we even have a space program called NASA today. He was one of the main originators of the NASA space program in the United States. Now, back to Stella, the astrophysicist that did this interview, not too many years ago. She had actually went candid and went public in exposing the fact that when she worked under Wernher Von Braun, we're talking the late 1960s, that Wernher Von Braun had actually told her something interesting. When he was dying of cancer about a year prior to his death, then he had took her aside and he said, "You know what, Stella, I'm going to tell you something." Wernher Von Braun told this to Stella. He said, "I'm going to tell you something and you take it for what it's worth." He says there's going to be three phases in the world, major phases in the next 100, 150 years. The first one's going to be communism. The whole world's going to be afraid of communists, and the communists are going to be the major threat of the world. The second one's going to be terrorism, where basically, the terrorists are going to be a major threat. They want to hurt populations, they want to hurt people, and they're just going to be a major threat to the world. This is 1967. He says the last one, and she kept repeating this. He kept telling me about the last one. He says the last card they are going to pull is that they're going to make the human race believe that we're being attacked by extraterrestrials. And when she had asked, who are they? He says, it doesn't matter, because even if you knew, it would probably just endanger your life if you knew who they were, so it's irrelevant. When she asked what was the purpose of it, he says, it doesn't matter, because he really himself didn't know. He just knew that these people existed and they had this agenda specific. And he had later went on to say that all of it's fake. There were really no threat from communists per se. The communists did exist. Obviously the USSR did exist, but the threat of communism was really being controlled by both sides, from a group of people or an individual specifically funding and controlling both sides since day one with a predetermined outcome. As is the case with terrorism, as is the case that will happen with this extraterrestrial spoof. Why I thought that was phenomenally interesting is not so much in that respect itself, but right now, if you look at, Hollywood always preconditions people psychologically to what's going to happen in the world, really about 5, 10, 15 years before it happens. We see, before terrorism, you have so many action movies about, bad guys and drug dealers and drug traffickers and black arms operators. And because all this does is it kind of preconditions the person to accept when they see something like terrorists slamming into the Twin Towers. It helps you psychologically accept it, that that's a possibility and it can happen. It's just not out of the blue. And so what you see now with a lot of these movies coming out, Cowboys and Aliens and Skyline, Steven Spielberg making more alien movies than he ever has, and a lot of directors for that matter. Or Battle LA is another good example. And all these movies are about basically these extraterrestrials, these nebulous, ambiguous extraterrestrials coming from outside attacking the human race. And in every movie, the theme is exactly the same. And that theme is that, irrespective of our differences, cultural, religious, economic differences, we have to come together and we have to fight the extraterrestrials so that we can become victorious. Now that sounds like a very novel and humble idea, but what you don't understand, what we will see and what people will believe are actually extraterrestrials, in point of fact, just really high-end black operation military ops that we're seeing, with like a lot of the Bell technologies from Nazi Germany coming actually to fruition. A lot of this utilizing zero-point field, I don't know if you're familiar with that, nullifying the effects of gravitation on certain vessels. It's through manipulating the electromagnetic force in vehicles and also the ether around us, which was kind of like the Philadelphia experiment, if you're familiar with that, where they basically vanished and reappeared, and it was a mess. So what I'm trying to say is that, you really will see what you think are extraterrestrials in the next 5, 10, 15 years. What we would constitute as extraterrestrials in the respect of unidentified flying objects doing things that our current aerodynamics planes couldn't do. Now, the objective of that, of course, and this is what later Wernher Von Braun disclosed, is he says the objective of this whole situation is to make people come together under a one world government. That was kind of the final card, the closing card. And that they wanted people to basically come together because if the threat came from outside, it surpassed religion, it surpassed ethnic differences, it surpassed socioeconomic differences because it's coming from out there. And because of that, we all have to come together, irrespective of our differences, and fight this one nemesis. But the nemesis is really the government, just like it was in terrorism, just like it was in communism. And the objective is that, we're going to have a real battle. But, and you really will see spacecrafts, but these spacecrafts are, black ops military crafts. They're not, they're not from Neptune. They're not from Andromeda. They're from right here, probably, Area 51 or somewhere underneath Monaco, some of these CIA bases from Monaco. If you're vigilant and you heed a lot of these statements that people like Wernher Von Braun, there's many people, very credible people that made these kind of statements. Wernher Von Braun was just one of them. But if you heed these type of statements, and then you see something like, the media's coming out and they just start making a succession, really, of extraterrestrial movies where the theme is essentially the same. The human race is being attacked by extraterrestrials. The whole human race has to come together and we have to fight the ET threat, And the movies are the same across the board. I don't know if you saw Battle LA, or we just saw another one, a Super 8, same thing. A Skyline, same thing. Paul was a little bit more PG, but Paul was a nice guy and he helped people out. But same thing, extraterrestrial coming down here, CIA, this and that. But don't get me wrong, I personally believe that there has to be tremendous amounts of complex life out there in the universe and our solar system alone. Not to mention our galaxy, and then of course, really the infinity of the universe. There has to be tremendous amounts of life out there. But, I think what's going to happen right now, like I said, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, as predicted by many people, this isn't biblical prophecy. This is, Wernher Von Braun, people like that talking, very credible scientists, secular as well as religious people, blowing the whistle on this, on really the capstone of this grand conspiracy. And, people should look into that a little bit more, because I know some people are hopeful that it's going to be something other than what it is, but it's just, very high-end black ops military government controlling it, just like they have, the last 150 years. And again, the objective is not necessarily, it's not necessarily in the benefit of the average human individual. The objective is for the individuals to accept a one-world government under the basis that we need to fight together. That's the whole idea. And if I guess the human race doesn't conform, then things will just get ugly until they do conform. I don't know what that actually means, but I'm sure they're willing to kill people in order to get their way, just like they did just like they did with the Bolsheviks revolution. Educating yourself is the key. Educate yourself intellectually as well as spiritually as well as historically. That's the best bet. Prevention is the solution.